Okay, so this gentleman on the left is Don Felipe. He started Finca La Neutral in 1929. We can see some of the photos of the farm here. And so as I was mentioning earlier, these are coffee plants down on the bottom, the really long leaf, they almost look like avocados. And all coffee plantations will have shade trees over the top that'll sort of shade the coffee plant from having direct sunlight. And then you'll have these little coffee cherries here on the left, and you can, again, you have to wait till they're red. But Don Felipe started the farm back in 1929, and he called it La Neutral, Finca La Neutral, because his idea is that everybody's welcome, whether you do commercial real estate or commercial insurance, or you're a business broker or a photographer, or you do social media training. Everybody's welcome at Finca La Neutral because it's that kind of place. So it's now in its third generation, and it's owned by Betty Ann, who is here on the right, and her husband. So when I very first went to buy coffee for my coffee roaster, I hopped on Amazon. I bought a little coffee roaster and I was looking for green coffee. And I came across this listing right here, which is 3 pounds of unroasted coffee. So these are what's called green coffee beans. And it's 20 bucks, so about $6 a pound. And I bought this. And so I got it to the house. I started roasting it. And it was actually this place, which is called Primo's Coffee, which is their US arm. And then Finca La Neutral is their farm. So they bring the coffee into the United States, then they go out and sell it, right? And after, we started roasting more and more, we ended up buying from some local distributors for Nicaraguan coffee around here. And then long story short, I got introduced to another wholesaler who had a Nicaraguan farm and introduced me to Betty Ann. And Betty's like, Chris, don't you remember me? You bought your first coffee from me. And it was sort of a fun all the way back to the beginning. And so let's watch a little video that talks about the farm, and you guys can see. Can you guys hear that? Can you guys hear the audio on something like this whenever we share it?
When you shared the screen, if you clicked on shared audio, or if you click that audio, it should play, but otherwise you may have problems.
Okay, well, maybe we can just watch it on mute and I'll show you guys. So here's the nursery. They've got about 17,000 seedlings growing. As you can see, each one of those is actually a seedling that grows, and coffee takes 3 years before it's ready to start producing coffee. So this will be hard. This little seedling will be grown for about 9 to 12 months, and then they'll go ahead and plant it in the nursery. And then this gentleman has such a great Spanish accent, which I totally wish you guys could hear it. But these are the flowers that coffee plants will grow. And then underneath each of these flowers sort of smell like jasmine. You'll see there's these tiny little cherries that grow underneath of them that are coming right up. And so these little cherries right here are going to ultimately become coffee beans. And the plant itself will flower about 3 separate times. So these are the actual cherries, and then they'll have a picture coming up where there'll be like 3 different sizes of cherries on the same plant because of that flowering process over the course of the year. So I'm definitely not doing his accent justice. Has anybody ever been to a coffee plantation before, or like been to a coffee farm? Okay, we've got some yeses. Yeah, okay, I see some hands for sure. Yeah, I think it's like going to a winery. It tastes better when you know where it's coming from, right? Like that's definitely our model, is like we try to be as transparent as possible about where our product comes from, because we think that in a world where you can get anything online, knowing where something comes from makes you feel better about your purchase. Try to connect people. There's a book that I really recommend called Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a woman who's a doctor of botany, and she's also a professor of she's also a Native American woman, and she weaves these 2 worlds together to talk about the honorable harvest, which is how do the purchases I make honor where they actually come from? And that's sort of the approach that we try to take, is the honorable harvest. Like we want to know exactly who our farmers are. Right now we're doing Zoom calls. Normally we travel and see them. But this is where, your El Sol comes from. This is where your El Diablo and your La Jimenez, 3 of our 6 roasts, actually come from. And so we'll skip ahead a little bit to the actual harvest. So now you can see these red berries are ready to be harvested, and they have to be picked by hand in all countries except, anybody know the only country they don't hand pick their coffee? Brazil. It's actually Brazil. And that's why Brazilian coffee can be so much cheaper, because they have these machines that just shake And then that's like real commodity coffee. That's where Folgers and a lot of companies get there. It's called Brazilian Robusto. So,
Hey, Chris, why do you have to pick it by hand out of curiosity?
because like not all of the cherries, because they go through different flowering seasons over the course of the year, not all the cherries are going to be ready. So in this example, if we were to just take all the cherries on the branch right here, we'd be missing this. All of these green ones right here would come through. These are not ready. These are not ripe. So the idea is there are tribes of people that their whole community, their kids, the families, they travel through Central America and they harvest cherries over the course of harvest season. And that's their culture.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So you pick your coffees by hand. There's a friendly lady, and then this is the milling process. So you'll mill all of your cherries. You actually wash them, and you're trying to pull the seed out, and you'll see the seed that comes out here shortly. So this is the coffee cherries actually going through the mill, and they're going to yield these. So these are the green coffee beans before they actually harvest, and these will ferment for about 36 days, and then you get green coffee. So this is what I buy. I buy the green coffee, and then we roast it, find the single origin. We do what's called a cupping, which is where we roast like a bunch of coffees. We try them, and then we pick our favorites. And that's if we're going downstream. So say I meet with a wholesaler and we go downstream. The other option would be going upstream, which is I travel to Guatemala, we meet farms, we bring the coffee back, we try to create enough demand to fill a shipping container, then we come back and the farm, like one of us is going to carry the price of that. So that is a quick overview on that farm and the cherry process, if you will.
Hey, Chris, would you mind if I interrupt? I was curious.
Please,
the fruit,
you guys go ahead.
Yeah, the fruit that's being extracted and removed from the bean or the seed, is that utilized in any way, shape, or form, or is it just waste product?
There's been a couple ways that people have tried to use it. So there's like coffee cherry tea that you can buy if you're a whole leaf tea buyer, and that does have some caffeine in it. So I've seen that. Like I actually, when we were making our first beer with Odyssey Beer Works, the brewer that I was speaking to he was working with a group that had a bunch of these basically depulped cherries, and they're like trying to find a use for them. And we really couldn't find anything. I think that somebody may eventually solve that problem, but right now I think they just end up becoming fertilizer, to be honest. Yeah. They smell like wine when they're fermenting.
I was assuming they would just go back into the soil some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, they eventually ferment them fully, and then it smells like wine on the coffee farm during harvest season. And then they dry them for 36 hours. But the rest of that, yeah, it just goes back into like a soil plant, and then it just gets put back into the soil. But you'll see if you go to these coffee farms, like massive fields of beans drying. So that 36 hours, they're just on these huge concrete like fields basically. And then they harvest, and then they put them into bags. So I was buying those 3-pounders right in the beginning and trying to figure out, what the light, medium, dark roasts were. And then this is pre haircut, Chris. This is my first bag that I ever bought. So 150 pounds, that runs like, $300-400. And I was so happy that I dressed up that day that I was roasting to take that picture. And
I have a quick question, Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned earlier that Brazil has a machine that shakes the trees to pick the cherries, but that's the cheaper coffee. Does that mean that, sorry, my dog wants to make an appearance too.
Hello, perrito.
Does that mean that coffee has either underripe or overripe coffee in it? That's why.
So some of the cherries probably are, because they're not handpicked, aren't going to be as ripe, and that'll affect flavor for sure. And then, one of the old secrets there's a couple old secrets of coffee. The first is just dark roast everything, because coffee is one of the very few things that when you cook it, it actually gets more bold as you roast it longer, versus like it doesn't get that they call it anise is the technical flavor term, but that real rubbery type burnt taste that you get when you burn food. Coffee goes through a phase where it develops and gets richer and bolder until like usually a little bit past second crack. So that was like Starbucks roasts all their coffee to what's called full city, which is like dark roast past second crack. And the reason is they buy so much coffee. I mean, a lot of the farms we work with, they're now trying to like brand themselves, become specialty farms, and put out like a single origin product. But all their dads and their moms, that they just have contracts with Starbucks. So Starbucks is like, look, we'll buy all your lot, your entire harvest, because we have volume that we need to fill. And that's a system for the farmers that it's enough to sort of pay their dues and pay their expenses. But if they go the single origin, you know, it's more work to find the roasters for us to tell their story. It's the same thing for us telling our story of why we're different. You know, you have to find that audience that cares about where it comes from and then wants to develop the flavor profile for it.
Are there farms that specifically want to work with like single origin, you know, kind of smaller, like smaller guys? What are they looking for between kind of the Starbucks and the Madre collective guys?
So I mean, it's a lot of it's pricing power. Like you don't have a ton of pricing power when you work with a large conglomerate like a Starbucks or a Dunkin' or a Folgers. I mean, they have price targets they have to hit, just in the same way that if I'm going to a large restaurant group, they're like, look, we need it at this price. Can you do it or not? Because they don't have time to do the storytelling. So you're looking for a niche of like a roaster that is going to feature your farm. And then you're hiring an agent that's going to go out and tell that story and try to get your coffee on cupping tables around the country, really around the world, because the specialty movement's now in Japan, it's now in Africa, it's now especially in Europe and all over America as well. So you're kind of, you know, and you're spending money on branding, you're spending money on your social, you're spending money, you know, on the organic certifications for sure. So it's definitely, it's more of a process for that type of product. Yeah, and you guys feel free and ask questions as much as you want too. Can you see the grid of the people that I see, or do you just see the slide?
I just depends. There's a different settings that people can have, Chris. So some of us may just be looking at the slides. I did have a question that I brought up shortly before we started, because this might be a good time to raise it. Like, how has the pandemic affected, say, the distribution in particular, or just in general, the coffee industry? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so whenever the shutdown was happening, a lot of the ports weren't able to garner the same amount of workers that they had before. So what ended up happening is a lot of these ships that were full of containers of coffee had to float for a while. And there was like a backup that occurred in the supply chain. And so on top of that, just like a lot of food product, restaurant demand really fell off because a lot of the restaurants had really stopped. So the consumers made up for some of that with the consumer demand increasing. So, you know, we definitely changed our strategy. We became more consumer focused versus we were supply oriented before. But there was like a hiccup in demand for sure. Now, what is beautiful about coffee though, is that green unroasted coffee, like, let me actually go to this slide. So on this far left right here, this is the unroasted coffee. It looks very much like beans, if you will. It can sit on your shelves for 2-3 years, and some people prefer it to be aged a little bit. So it doesn't, it's like a unique food product in that way. It's technically a bean versus a food product until it's roasted. And at that point, freshness, you know, it has a life cycle. But
I do have one other question. You used that term earlier, first crack. Can you elaborate? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, that brings us to our next slide. Well done, Joyce, right on cue. So these are the grades of coffee roasting. And so you have, as you guys saw, the cherries first, well, really the flower first, and then the cherries. And then you get to this first crack. And so when you're roasting coffee, it sounds like popcorn. Like you'll just hear this pop, 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 pop. And then we're at first crack. And that is like the lightest you could really drink it, because have any of you guys ever like roasted nuts before? Yes, no, maybe so, yeah. Okay, so there's a process called Maillard, which is anytime you roast like a nut or a bean, it's whenever proteins convert to sugars. And that's where you get the sweetness of roasting nuts and also the sweetness of roasting coffee. It's called the Maillard phase. So we go from the green to the yellow, which is the drying yellow, to first crack, which is Maillard. And then from here, we're going from your light roast to your medium to your dark. These are not terms you would use if you're at like a specialty coffee association, because everyone's highbrow. But your first crack is the second picture. Then you'd say your cinnamon roast, your city roast, and your full city roast, to use those terms that are like coffee specialty certified. But I think that whenever we started, so our very first roast, which was El Sol, was actually this one. It's like a light brown. The light looks a little bit dark on this picture, but it's a light brown, and it was the very first profile we ever created from this farm, the Nicaraguan farm. And then from there, we roasted it to a medium roast, which kept a little bit more of its like dark cherry flavor, but you started to get some like nutmeg, clove, and then lastly, the dark roast, which is more full-bodied. This can be used for espresso. We don't go pat, like second crack is right where we stop, and that's when you're at, second crack is when you're at dark roast. Any questions there, or I will?
Hey, Chris,
So with
go ahead, Melissa.
so refrigerating ground coffee or not refrigerating ground coffee as far as keeping it fresh?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's definitely a sort of one of those things that's everyone knows about. It's just like a wives' tale, so to speak. I don't know if that term's appropriate, but like an old tale, you know what I mean? So some people will freeze coffee because it is a foodstuff. Once you roast coffee, you know, it will lose freshness over time. The bigger difference between in the fridge or out of the fridge is actually whole bean versus ground, because there's a lot of the aromas and oils that come out of the coffee once it becomes ground. And not everybody has a coffee grinder. That's fine. We're not here to judge you. We're here to love you. We're Madre Coffee. Everyone's welcome at the table. But you can put your coffee in the freezer, especially if you buy in bulk. You're technically supposed to defrost it afterward, because otherwise there's like a lot of that water gets frozen, and you would want to let it return to room temperature. In the same way that if you grill meat, you want that to return to room temperature so that it cooks evenly. It's the same thing with coffee.
Hey, Chris, I was going to share a little tidbit that the only coffee tour I'd been on was out in Kona with Monk Coffee, and he's a small plantation, single individual grower. So, I mean, micro plantation, I guess I would say. But one of the things I never even considered that I don't know how many people on this call have thought about is that I asked him what his favorite roast was out of the 4 or 5 or 6 that he grew and then roasted himself. And his response to me was, well, you combine them. When you want the coffee, that the light roast has more aromatic qualities, more of the floral qualities, your darker roast will have more of the chocolates, and your traditional, maybe some more of the sweetness. And so he said what he would do in his house, and he sells them light roast, medium roast, dark roast, or, you know, as you described, the cinnamon and the city. But he sells them individually, but he says when he's at home, he takes all 3 roasts and combines them in a certain ratio that is to his palate, where he gets all of those flavor and aromatic profiles. I just thought, I'd never heard of that before. And I just thought that was something for everybody to go home and try. Go get 2 of Chris's roasts, the medium and the light, and try them. And then change the ratio from, 25-75 to maybe 50-50. And I thought that was just, I'd never heard of that. So just sharing a little tidbit.
That's checks in the mail. Thank you very much, Lowry. But no, I love that. And it's true. I mean, you just start doing it. My mom said that my mom's one of 7, and the Madre of Madre Coffee, if you will. And my grandmother would always tell her, she's like, my children are like my hand. She's like, each finger does something different, but they're all part of my hand, and they all make, so that I can love all of them, even though they're different, which I think that's kind of how I look at our coffee roasts. Like, El Sol is how it all started. El Jefe is probably our best seller, the Guatemalan. I've drank a ton of both of them. So now we're working on roasting up, our first African coffee. But then I'll roast the African coffee, and it's a little bit more medium dark than it is as light as I would like it. Okay, well, the next roast, I'll lighten that up. But in the meantime, I'll add some El Sol, some of the light roast, to take off some of the edge of the darkness of one of them. So yeah, and then so you start playing around with those, and those are a ton of fun. I think that we still like to keep our, sort of brand as single origin, because I want you to know that you're buying from a specific farm, I think. And then from there you can expand, sort of your taste palette, if you will. Because what happens is once people start blending and they start blending, and then it's whatever's lying around, and then it just everything is the blue ribbon blend, right? And so we try to like keep a little bit of that, the commitment to quality in the single origin. But then once you guys have it, yeah, play with it, you know what I mean, and have a lot of fun with it for sure. And then especially with cold brew, I'm an opportunist at my house when it comes to coffee. So you can buy yourself a little cold brew maker on Amazon. And then whatever we have a little bit left of each of those coffee bags, you're wondering, what do you do when you've got, you know, just like 30 grams of a couple different coffees lying around your house? Like grind them all up, put them all into a cold brew container, and then you've got, you know, a really fun way to use that coffee and still get a lot of the flavors out of it. So good points. Just like, it's I was trying to think of what a good analogy would be. Like essential oils is not it. I'm not like, oh, just use some lavender and then use some cinnamon and you make your own blend. So that's probably not a good analogy. But the idea of like, you can buy pre-made mixed spices, or you can know the spices that you cook and then mix them together, right? It's kind of that concept. It's probably a better one. So how are we doing time-wise? We've got about 10 more minutes, is that right?
About 10 more minutes, yeah. Hey, Trace, did you have an observation or a comment or a question?
Oh yeah, you said, you know, I don't know about essential oils, and I was like, would it be terpenes?
Yeah, I'm not the essential oil expert.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, okay, so these are just the 3 from the Nicaraguan farm that we've created, which are El Sol. Can you guys still hear me? My AirPods. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got El Sol, which is sort of a buttery caramel flavor. That's the light roast. Definitely going to be on the lighter end, obviously, of these 3. First roast profile we ever created. Next is La Jimenez, which is my mom's maiden name. That's what we named after her. That's got sort of a nutmeg clove, and this is the same bean, right? So you're going to notice consistencies like throughout if you're sort of comparing and contrasting. And then lastly is El Diablo. My mom calls it El Dios because, you know, she's a religious woman. So anytime I send her this, I have to cross through it and write El Dios on the label. But that's got sort of it's like a sweetness, but it's not quite caramel. It's like a little bit darker. So almost like a maple syrup, nutmegness to it. So one of our clients uses this for their espresso.
Do all these flavors come from the soil, or how are all these flavors kind of ingrained into the beans?
It's a lot of it's soil, a lot of it's the type of bean. So if we were going to go a level deeper than just the country, there's like different genotypes of coffee. There's Katui, there's Katura, there's Bourbon, then of course there's the Geisha. So some of it comes from the actual genotype of the coffee bean itself. Some of it comes from the soil. So Central American coffees are known to be kind of nutty. African coffees are known to have like sort of a lemongrass to them. And then South American coffees are known for having like a bold richness flavor. I think it's just a little bit more of it's the soil and the heat and the condition as well.
It really isn't much different than wine.
It's so similar, Valerie. Absolutely. Yeah. Even the Guatemalan coffee has like a little bit of the like earthiness that like a Malbec wine would have because it's grown next to a volcano. So there is that sort of earthy finish that you get in Malbec wine in the Guatemalan coffee as well.
And that's what I was hearing when you were talking about blending the coffee beans. I'm like, well, that's what a red blend is. It's very specifically choosing grapes to blend and then developing that flavor profile.
It is such a similar business, yeah. Some pros and cons, like they can't really mail stuff out too well, but their product will save in a bottle versus ours. We can mail, but we can't like, you know, there's like shelf life once it roasts. Anyways. Okay, well, we've got a few more minutes, so I thought I would just do a really quick overview on merchandise because we've had a lot of fun. Like, I worked with a designer who's taught me a ton, and if any of you want to like make little bits of clothing for yourself or for your team heading into the holidays, or even for your family, there's a website you can use that we've used a lot called Printful. Has anybody ever used Printful here or heard of it? Okay, so I see some no's and some yeses. So here's a couple of the brand shots that we took. Here's a insider tip. I actually was holding a beer. This was on a boat, but crap that. Now it's a beanie shot. So, and then here's one of my friends. We got this one of our shirts with like the Casper logo. We have a marketing intern. I'll talk about at the very end who helped us take some of these. All right, so really quickly, all you have to do if you want to make a very basic shirt is to pop into Printful, which you can just go to printful.com and you create templates. So what I did is I downloaded the Denver Data Web logo, and we are going to make a quick shirt. So here's like all of the templates that we've created for our clothing, but super quick. We're just going to create a new template for Denver Data Web. So look at all the stuff that you can make. Everything from men's, women's clothing. A lot of the stuff we do is unisex, actually. Hats, you can do backpacks, masks, cell phones, pillows. All of this stuff like is now drop shippable. So instead of ordering a ton of this and trying to sell it as an extension of your brand, or you can just order a few of these and then you put them on your online store, and then Printful fulfills it, which is incredible. So say that we were just going to make a long sleeve right here for Denver Data Web, and I am now a merchandiser. We simply pull up the shirt, drop the design that we've loaded in here, which is their logo. I did a Google search and downloaded their logo. I'm going to shrink this a little bit and put it above the chest. And then I'm going to go to the back of this shirt and I'm going to add the logo again, make it a touch larger. And now we have Denver Data Web Christmas shirts. And what you'll notice is I actually am wearing the shirt that I'm showing you guys. So how do I get back to seeing all your pretty faces? Anyways, we'll just finish the presentation and then I'll turn off the screen share. So if you guys want to do any of that, just let me know. Or if you have any questions, it's super easy to do. And the cool part is that like it's something you can like Printful will take off your hands. So last couple things in terms of events and upcoming, we have an ice cream coming out with High Point Creamery. So on November 15th, which is a Sunday at 2 o'clock, this will all go out in the email blast as well. So if you guys are not on our email list, just let me know and I'll put you on it. But we're going to do a little grab ice cream, come eat at the park and kind of hang out. Hopefully the weather cooperates. For those of you that are in our coffee club, we have been roasting some African coffees. So Abuela, which is the grandmother of coffee, Abuela, because Ethiopia is the first country the coffee came from. We'll be going out. So lemongrass, brown sugar, and jasmine are the tasting notes for that one. Retail obviously is live. And then lastly, we do have a new marketing intern, Kaylin Brooks. She's a senior at Colorado Christian University. She's awesome. She's done a lot of the social for us, a lot of the like website and the product photography. She's been fantastic. So if you guys would be open to doing a one-on-one, she's really loving building her network now. So I'd love to.
How did you find her? How did you find Kaylin?
So I was prospecting a coffee shop in Lakewood called Hello Coffee. And
oh my, I love Hello Coffee. Yeah, I did one-to-ones there. It's so cute up in Green Mountain.
Adorable, yeah. So I was in there and I kind of dropped some coffee off and I had called them ahead of time and gotten approval. And she wrote me an email. She's like, hey, I love your story. I love what you stand for. I love the fact you came in here and prospected. Like, would you be interested in allowing me to be your marketing intern just to gain some experience in real world?
Well, she was working there.
She was working there. And so she prospected me and she's fantastic. So yeah, so we, you know, anytime she does photo shoots with friends, you know, we like pay for the day or send her retail. She drinks free coffee. Like, you know, we're obviously a startup, so we're trying to sort of hit our tipping point, but nonetheless, she's been fantastic. And it's also nice just to have somebody who holds me accountable, you know, vice versa. So
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys. I'll go ahead and we'll open it up for questions there. And please let me know.
This coffee is awesome. Good stuff.
Thank you so much.
So do we have questions for Chris? That was just, hey, let's just put some applause. It was awesome.
I have a question. Does everybody get a copy of the presentation?
Yeah, I could definitely share that.
Yeah, I think you have to really probably just ask him directly. I mean, I don't have a way to like email everyone. So
Okay,
if you want it, I would just ask him. I can email things like to our members, but I don't have, I don't have an email.
Yeah, I sent Chris my email address. A,
Mhm.
and then B, I just want to let you know I've got a hard stop at 1, so I'm gonna have to bug out in a minute. I don't
And
want to be.
I'll tell you what, I do have a recording, Jody, that will come up to Zoom, and I should be able to put a link to that, I think, in the comments for the
And
event.
Jody, I'll add you to the list and send you the presentation.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we understand.
And did I understand correctly that this is the last meeting until January?
No.
Oh.
That's a different group. That's some other group I was talking about. No, we're meeting November 17th, and Don Fitch will present from Merrill Lynch. And then December 15th is, well, historically it's been more of a business meeting. We've got to figure out if we'll have a presenter or not. I mean, Lowry and Tom and I and Don need to talk, but we will for sure have a meeting in November, Jody.
Okay.
I mean, with a presenter, a regular meeting like this. Yeah.
What's the best way to learn the different, what French roast is, what Colombian roast is, what, any of them that signify that's what they are? What's the best way to learn what that actually means?
Pretty much like anything that's like a country roast is like a pretty dark roast. So Italian, Spanish, French, those are all really dark roasts is what I found. And then everything else like full city is more medium and dark. But I think that terminology is going away. Like I think that most of the lay consumers are just light, medium, dark roast. And that's typically our first question whenever we meet people and they're kind of sort of trying us out. As advertised, Jody's got a call. See you, Jody. But yeah, so.
Anything else for Chris? Because otherwise I wanted to let people know it's fine to talk about events and stuff or one-to-ones you've had or anything like that. So do you want to just unmute and just share?
Sure.
I'll start off.
Yeah, just somebody to start off. I'm just trying to get something to put into the chat. So just go ahead, whoever wants to start.
So I had a great couple one-on-ones. I had one with Susan, man, and learned a little bit more about what she's doing. I've known her kind of in a previous life where she was just focusing on like digital signage, and to learn more about what she's doing with Google is pretty fascinating. And I had one with Joyce. And if you haven't had a one-on-one with Joyce, and if you want to learn about LinkedIn, I know a lot of people who know LinkedIn, and Joyce by far knows everything to know about LinkedIn there is. She just kind of blew me away. And thank you, Joyce. I haven't done my about section. You have to redo that. So I'm working on that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that. And also too, Kyle Vambavakis, he just stopped by last month. Yeah. He called me up and, he said, I need some help with a client of mine. And we had a couple calls and I got a new client because of Kyle. So I just wanted to say that too as well.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's great, there's a lot of networking that goes on, even amongst just people that generally just attend, don't necessarily belong to the group. Other people have had any one-to-ones or other any events or something you want to bring up? Anybody else want to share?
No, I had a great one-to-one with Mark, and we had a deep conversation about telling stories and how do you do that for a remote workforce. And so always, I'm hoping we can do some business together, but if not, it was still just a really educational and thought-provoking conversation. Great time. If whether you think you need a photographer or not, it's a great opportunity to kind of get some insight as to how to storytell and how photography really builds that, whether it's video or still. So I encourage you to do one with Mark, even if you don't think you need a photographer. You may find that you need a photographer after talking to Mark.
And yeah, yours is an interesting situation. And how do you provide content for a company that has all remote people in all different parts of the country without spending $100,000 flying somebody everywhere? I don't know yet. We're working on it. I got a little notebook of ideas.
Well, and kind of to build on that a little bit, I wanted to encourage people to come to my Simplify Your Social Media meetup group. It's another free meetup where storytelling in one word is one of the most fun activities I've ever done. And it's a cool little system that my friends Elise Blum and Keith Bailey have put together. And just an example, we do it in small, like three, we've done meetup groups, breakout groups here. So the question might be, think of cars, your first car, your worst car, and your best car. Just think. And then they give you like a minute. So you create a little story of say 1 or 2 minutes, and you tell that to the other two people. So it's really good practice for speaking extemporaneously and just, putting your thoughts together. It's just a lot of fun. So we're going to do that in November 10th. That's a second Tuesday of the month. There's always a week before this meeting. So I thought I'd just do, and it's on Zoom. It's on Zoom. Any other events or one-to-ones? I'm trying to think of other one-to-ones I've had.
Yeah, Joyce, I'll chime in.
Yeah,
I'll chime in with an upcoming event. It's a in-person B2B, or not B2B, in-person networking event that's hosted by the Wheat Ridge Business Association. And we're going to be meeting tomorrow, 5 p.m. at Infinitus Pie, which is a great little pizza bar joint off 38th Ave in Wheat Ridge proper. So there's a couple around town, but it's the Wheat Ridge location. So tomorrow, 5 o'clock, I'll actually try to pull down the link.
Yeah, we've got time. Put it in the chat. That sounds really fun to be able to do that. Any other events at all, or get-togethers? And again, Sarah and I, it was just really fascinating and neat to hear how she landed at Denver Data Web. I always love the backstory and her dogs. And this is her first house. Sarah just recently bought, get this, her first house right before COVID set in. And Sarah, who's never taken a day off since she was like 12 or, sort of young, has worked, like never had a baby, had maternity leave, things like that. So she could like nestle in, just picture this, into her cozy little house here in Lakewood and just chill. So I thought you might like that image.
Well, so what happened was I wasn't with Denver Data Web at that time. I was with a different company. I closed on my house. 3 weeks later, they did layoffs. And I was in that round of layoffs. So I had just bought my first home. Like Joyce said, really never taken a day off, worked my butt off for my entire life pretty much. And suddenly I had my house, I had my space, and I had all the time in the world for 3 months before I went back into the workforce. So it was terrifying. The timing was actually kind of awful, but actually kind of perfect. So
that's one of my favorite COVID stories, really. And I gotta know, can you private chat me your actual street address so that I can like stalk you when I walk by?
Absolutely, yes.
At your house or something, not exactly stalk, but
Okay. I have a question out to Ryan. Ryan, you talked about having the suites for rent. Is that information available on your website, or is that something where we need to reach out to you directly?
Yeah, we have a website that kind of touches on that, like what we have available, but it doesn't go too deep into detail. It's one of those things where it's just enough to get you to try to call in. So I'd be able to walk you through it in probably 5 minutes. It's pretty limited this year, but like I said, it's a pretty cool opportunity for friends, family, businesses. So yeah, feel free. Shoot me a note here real quick. And if you want to walk through it, I'm more than happy to do that for you.
Absolutely. And can you throw the website in the chat?
Yeah. I'll just shoot you a note here real quick. We'll set something up.
Awesome.
I'm trying to think. She's in Lakewood. Yeah, any other thoughts at all? Yes, it was just really, oh my gosh, Chris, it's such a fascinating presentation, really off the beaten path a bit. Thank you again from, I don't want to say boring exactly, but more typical B2B kind of talks to get to hear all about coffee. It's just beautiful. Makes you just want to go to Central America too. I'm like, feel like I got a travelogue all at the same time, like Anthony Bourdain or something, it's really taking us on some exotic trip. So it's pretty neat. Yeah, it's really good. Thanks everybody for coming. So I can't think of anything else. I've got your address now. So make sure to save the chat. Click, how to do that by now, click on the 3 dots. Generally, I've not been saving that. I save it for myself. So if you don't ever sometimes save it, and then I'll, and then also if you want the recording, ask me, I can just forward you the email that'll come here in a few minutes. And Chris, I didn't start at the very beginning, but all of a sudden I realized, I guess maybe Sarah, you had chatted me, something had happened. Yeah, 4 blocks, right. Then I thought, oh my gosh, Tom always wants me to record these. So it is recorded. So that's good for you to watch.
I told him and he said thank you. So he didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Yeah. It was almost, it was when we had the part about Betty buying it and stuff. Yeah, okay. So then have a good rest of your week and stay safe and healthy, especially as COVID on the rise. We'll just
Good to
all
see
affirm
everyone.
safety and health, right? And see you next month and we'll learn about finances.
Bye.
Not quite as much fun as coffee, but still good for us. Yes. Right.
Bye, everybody. Good job, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, that was awesome, Chris.
Thanks,
So
Chris. A great job.
Thank you
yeah,
guys
I like
so
your
much. I
haircut.
appreciate that.
Much better.
Good to
Good
see
job,
you,
Chris.
Chris. And
You too.
everybody.
See you soon. See you guys soon.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I think we're all set here. Okay. All right.